with the Ghana Federation of Disability Organizations to discuss strategies that will create employment avenues for persons with disability. Throughout the world, paid work is a crucial aspect of culture which is identified with many individuals organizing themselves around employment. Employment helps define an individual's place in the community and society. Sadly, the unemployed are often excluded from important activities and roles within the social group. Whilst reliable data on employment of persons with disability worldwide is difficult to come by, available data indicate that persons with disability have poorer employment outcomes than people without disability. They are not frequently considered potential members of the workforce. Perception, fear, myth, and prejudice continue to limit understanding and acceptance of disability in workplace everywhere. Contrary to these notions, many companies which have persons with disability employees have found them to be more capable. Workplaces with more diversity of persons with disability add their talent and bring new ideas and solutions to the table. In reality, workers with disability have lower rates of absenteeism and turnover are largely loyal to their organization. Again, the cost of hiring persons with disability are no longer higher than hiring persons without disability. All a worker with disability may need is an opportunity. It's one opportunity. To the employer, that offers the payoff. The payoff is real, and the benefits to society are profound. I hope all the employers will leave this fair with this understanding and conviction, and open their doors to qualified and competent persons with disability job seekers. In order to promote inclusion and diversity at the workspace, employers must, among others, provide reasonable accommodation at the workplace. It can apply to the duties of the job, where and how job tasks are performed. The accommodation should make it easier for employee to successfully perform his or her duty. Examples of reasonable accommodation including providing interpreters, readers, or other personal assistants, modifying job duties, restructuring work sites, providing flexible work schedules, and providing accessible technology and other place work adaptive equipment. Employers are missing out a golden opportunity to hire well-qualified people who also bring to the job surpassed loyalty, dedication, and commitment. The government will promote policies that will create the enabling environment for the employment of persons with disability. Among others, annual tax rebates will be granted to employers who employ persons with disability in accordance with Section 10 of the Disability Act. Government will be working with relevant stakeholders to develop policies on specific job quotas for persons with disability in both the private and the public sectors. Institutions which train persons with disability will be modernized, improved, and resourced so that they can offer relevant technical and skill training programs. I would like to appeal to the media to highlight the competencies of persons with disability that will be on display at this fair. The Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection is ready to collaborate with the Ghana Federation of Disability Organization and its partners to examine the recommendations made at the fair and find out how they can be implemented. I wish, in conclusion, that employers and persons with disability job seekers would enjoy fruitful interaction, and I hope that the fair will end successfully with more persons with disability job seekers being offered employment opportunities. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, Your Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of Ghana, invited guests, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocol duly observed. I am here this morning to share with you an artwork as the MCC in the form of a poem The poem is with me here, entitled Untapped Talent. And you can just guess the meaning of the poem from the title of the poem. We are going to share the poem together. So we go. Do we as employers believe in ability? There is disability, but there is ability beyond the disability. There are notions, but there are facts beyond the notions. Our competence is more considerable to the expertise of the most desired. Yet, the merit lives on our assault shadows. Employment is, but we lack the surviving encounter of usage prospects from surviving manifests of retrospects. Employment is, but we lack, for trust in whimsy impresses, a peril of progresses. It seems to me employers are desensitized to the diamond competence of the marginalized, and yet our diamond skills are disenfranchised. Unemployment figures as high as we exist, whilst our potential competence consistently persists. As the living world does exist, the world is all must desire diversity as catalyst to all possibility. But yet many are desperate and despair, damning wisdom and knowledge acquired. In diversities from versities, yet the fabulous untapped talents, employment and unemployment, controverting warriors leaders in a single battle, devastating and tearing families apart, the most patriotic leaving their homes, the strongest down in broken hearts, the most honorable fall in humiliation, empowering poverty and deprivations. Only those with no names to call can do. We are, but not opportune to leave the game. For we are called and judged by a name, and not what we know or can do. There is nothing to celebrate in full when games are still won by compassion and competence slowly buried in the catacomb. How can you as employers stand in folded arms and watch this happening alone? Thank you very much. The poem ends with a question. How can we as employers stand in folded arms and watch this happening in alarm?
Thank you very much. It's always great when the poem ends in a question. His Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of Ghana, is here. And certainly he will hear us and take it to where it can be dealt with. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and now I have the singular honor and the privilege to invite the Vice President of the land, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, to give the keynote address and the launch of the GFD project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, National President, the Ghana Federation of Disability Organizations, the CEO of the Private Enterprise Foundation, representatives for the ministers of employment as well as gender, program coordinator for the Disability People's Organization of Denmark, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the Federation, to the Ghana Federation of Disability Organizations for the invitation to speak at this important fair. It is indeed a great honor to be with you today, and I thank you for the warm welcome. I would also like to extend greetings from His Excellency President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, and to assure you that our government is ever committed to enhancing inclusive development across the country. Mr. Chairman, I wish to congratulate the Ghana Federation of Disability Organizations for yet another successful celebration of the National Day of Disability last week, which was marked to commemorate 11 years after the passage of the Disability Act of 2006, Act 715. God willing, we look forward to celebrating the annual International Day of Disability with you all, which is coming up towards the end of the year on December 10th. These two celebrations, the National Day of Disability in Ghana and the International Day of Disability, are marked to create awareness and sensitize the public about challenges of living with disability and the need to make provisions to create an inclusive society where persons with disabilities can function effectively and contribute to the development of the nation. There are over 3 million people living with disabilities in Ghana, and they are an integral part of our nation's development. Unfortunately, the disabled community in Ghana, and indeed the world over, has been marginalized to a large extent and faces several challenges, including discrimination, limited access to public facilities, and lack of equal access to health and educational opportunities, as well as unemployment. One thing that is, however, clear, and on Monday I visited the Akropong School of the Blind, and one thing which is clear when you interact with persons of disability is the increasing realization that disability is not inability. That has to come through. And that mindset, when you see someone who is disabled in one way, either physically or visually impaired or whatever, we have to move away from this notion that disability is inability. If we can get around that, because as the headmistress at Akropong School for the Blind was telling me, they won the spelling bee in that particular area. And that is, that shows you this is Akropong School of the Blind. Number one, they came first in the spelling bee. And it just tells you that disability is not inability. In fact, God compensates us in many different ways. And maybe may not give you eyesight, but give you something even much better than that. And that ability that you have should be allowed to shine through for all of us to see. They had a wonderful school band, some of the best music you will hear. But yes, they are disabled, but They play better music than many able-bodied people. So it is something, if we are thinking about the job market, we have as a country, as a nation, we have to keep understanding that disability is not inability. That becomes a very, very important factor for employers. You have to, as an employer or a potential employer, understand that when you employ someone with a disability, it doesn't mean they cannot do the job, or you should not consider employing them because you think they are not going to be able to do the job. Mr. Chairman, the good news is that we are, as a government, we are committed to developing a comprehensive, inclusive plan and robust interventions for persons with disability. In order to achieve this, there is the need for accurate and reliable data of people living with disability in the country. The National Identification System, which is expected to be rolled out starting this year, will enable government to capture such accurate data and up-to-date information on persons with disability, which will serve as a first step towards the provision of more and accurate support for the community. Currently, the rate of unemployment in the country, that is both able-bodied and the people living with disabilities, is high. And President Akufo-Addo's government is committed to tackling the unemployment rate in the country through various ambitious policies being implemented, both in agriculture, in industry, and infrastructure, and so on. Government is committed to creating employment opportunities and ensuring a safe and inclusive society, as well as facilitating access to public places by persons with disabilities. As part of measures to get people with disabilities employed, the Ministry of Roads and Highways is rolling out a system that will ensure the recruitment of persons with disabilities to work in automated toll agents at various toll booths in the country. Once this process is completed, persons with disabilities would constitute not less than 50% of the people employed to operate toll booths across the country. This direct intervention is aimed at helping reduce the unemployment rate amongst persons with disabilities in order to provide them with a source of livelihood, which will in turn break the cycle of poverty facing most people with disabilities in the community. While this is an important initiative as far as the employment within toll booths is concerned, it is not sufficient. What we need is more mainstreaming of persons with disabilities across both the private and public sector, in the banks, in the, wherever you're talking about, the ministries, across the public and private sector. We need to have a strategy of making sure that persons with disabilities attain that employment status. Unfortunately, if action is not positively taken to ensure the employment of persons with disabilities, it will not happen. We have to be honest and proactive on this issue. And a healthy amount of positive discrimination in this aspect is needed. Without that, if we just say, let's let the market do it and people do it out of the goodness of their hearts, it may not really happen. And if we want to build the inclusive society that we should be building as a country, then we should let the laws support the positive discrimination in favor of the hiring. And I think that at least in terms of the Persons with Disabilities Act, if we put it in force, we will get movement in this direction. Mr. Chairman, in addition, as a government, we have increased the amount of the District Assembly Common Fund that is being allocated to persons with disabilities from 2% to 3%. This is something that has been talked about but has not really been implemented. We are implementing it, but more importantly, as we discussed at the Economic Management team a few weeks ago, when we discussed this issue, we understood that when the money in fact gets to the districts, there is a problem of actually moving the money from the district assemblies to the persons with disability. And so we need a second intervention. Apart from increasing the amount that is going to the district, we need to operate a system that is like the LEAP system, so that we can directly target the persons with disabilities in the districts, so that rather than wait on the district assembly to make those transfers, which we are hearing is not happening in many cases. If we register everybody as to LEAP, you can directly transfer those monies that are supposed to go to the districts for the benefits of persons with disabilities, directly to persons with disabilities. And this is what we have directed. So this is what we have directed ministries to start putting in place. Registration of persons with disabilities, so that we can follow the same sort of system that is working with the LEAP, where we can also address persons with disabilities. Mr. Chairman, in addition, we are in the process of implementing a policy where we are saying that 30% of the allocated 70%. What we are saying is that in Ghana, when we have a contract that is going to be taxpayer funded, Ghanaian and local entities must get at least 70% of that contract. But within that 70%, at least 30% of that should be sourced from entities owned by women and persons with disability, and those established under the Youth Enterprise Fund. So we are doing a positive discrimination in favor of women, the youth, and persons with disabilities for government-funded contracts that we're going to. And this, we think, will make a major impact in employment also of persons with disabilities as they get contracts that they execute on behalf of government. Mr. Chairman, government is further committed to equal employment opportunities and is in the process of implementing policies to ensure that persons with disabilities get equal opportunities to being appointed into public offices. However, to ensure this, there is the need to modernize, improve, and resource special training schools for persons with disabilities to be trained for technical and skilled programs. Obviously, Mr. Chairman, government cannot solve the issue of unemployment in our society on its own. This is why the private sector is encouraged to support government to reduce unemployment. I also want to use this opportunity to entreat employers to consider persons with disabilities in job listing as we work towards activating Section 46 of the Labour Act 2003, which seeks to offer special incentives to employers with people with disabilities. People with disabilities who engage in business or enterprise will also receive special incentives in accordance with the provisions of this Act. Mr. Chairman, our government is committed to the amendment of the Disability Act 2006, that is Act 715, to bring it at par with the UN Convention on Disability. Article 27 of the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities focuses on decent employment for people with disabilities, recognizing the right to work in a labor market that is open, inclusive, and accessible. It requires states to promote the realization of that right through prohibition of discrimination, protection of just and favorable work conditions, exercise of trade union rights, availability of vocational training, promotion of self-employment, ensuring the provision of reasonable accommodation, and promotion of work experience in open employment. Mr. Chairman, government does not wish for the Disability Act of 2006 Act 715 to just sit there and gather dust on our shelves. Government wants to see it work in our daily lives to ensure an inclusive society in which people living with disabilities, who are the world's biggest minority, play an integral role in the national development. To this end, besides the amendment of the Disability Act, government is also committed to passing the appropriate legislative instruments for the implementation of the Disability Act 715, as well as the Mental Health Act 2012, Act 846. It is a big shame that we've had a Disability Act since 2006, the Mental Health Act since 2012, and the LIs that are necessary to actually activate these acts and get the benefits to the people for whose benefit these acts were passed have not been promulgated. And our government, by the grace of God, will promulgate these LIs and will get them. Dear friends, we can all play a part in the inclusion process. Let us do so now. And employers, please remember, disability is not inability. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. So heartwarming to hear all these plans that are afoot for our brothers and sisters with disabilities. Is here. Shall we show our hands? The Ghana mining and people who are here. Fantastic. Ghana National Association of the Deaf. Are we here? Great. Burn Survivors Association. Okay, Ghana Association of Persons with Albinism. Okay, here. Inclusion Ghana. Ghana Society of the Physically Disabled. Share Care Ghana. That's right. Mental Health Society of Ghana. Thank you. Thank you so much for being part of today's function. I'll quickly invite our chairperson for the day to give his closing remarks. Shall we go down to the floor now?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think we all owe Excellency, the Vice President, for a laudable policy announcement this morning. Please, a round of applause. When I did my presentation, I talked about the previous NPP government that had enacted Act 715, the Disability Act, to put in place measures that would increase the employment or employability of people with disability. Now we have a new government of NPP, and here comes the Vice President making this policy change that 30% of all government purchases of goods and services. Originally, the government had announced that 70% of all goods and service contracts and purchases by the government will go to the indigenous, domestic, Ghanaian private sector, which never happened. That's a guarantee that 70% of this business is coming to the private sector. And now the Vice President is saying that out of the 70%, 30% is going to businesses with disability or people with disability, which to me is a very laudable opportunity. And also he indicated that transfers to the common fund, this common fund is going to be